Not gonna lie, Jimmy got that dropped on him like 10 minutes ago, and it is a long passage. Hey, good morning, everyone. We are wrapping up this series today called Into the Wilderness. We've been looking at the time that Jesus spent being tested, being tried in the wilderness, and then the surrounding time around that as well, kind of the lead up into that. And today, as we wrap up, this is what happens right after he comes out of the wilderness, is what Jimmy just read there in Luke's gospel. He begins doing ministry. And as we begin talking about this today, I want to set this up with some really interesting sociological data that has emerged lately. And this is just, I think this is just the way the Lord works. But this message was planned, the point of this message was planned, and then some information dropped last week, like just this past week. I'm like, this is perfect. This will fit perfectly that relates to the state of faith in really in the West, but mostly in our context in America, but also some in the UK as well. Like what is going on with church and people's faith in Jesus and Christianity? Where do things stand? In fact, if I were to ask you that, I would venture to guess that there might be many of you who would be like, that's probably not so good. It's not so good. And if I would go out kind of into the streets of Minerva and ask people that, hey, what do you think people think about Jesus right now? How's the church doing right now? How's faith doing right now? People, oh, it's bad. It's real bad. Except with a caveat. I think that now this is no shade, okay? So don't hear this as an insult. It's just an observation. If you are a little bit older, and I'm not going to define what older is. You can do that yourself. If you're a little older, you can define, what that is. But if you're a little older, you're probably more likely to say things are bad now than that they used to be, because you remember a time when some of us weren't alive and maybe things seemed different. Hey, now, I didn't call anybody out. I'm saying we love our senior saints here at Hope Community. Hey, but there would be like an overall... I'm not going to win today. This is just bad. Moving on. But there might be a thought that says it's declining, because I remember a time when everyone in church and everybody talked about Jesus and things were different, things were better. And so there might be an overall idea that faith is on the decline. But I've got really, really good news today. That is not the case. That is not true. Like empirically, like there is data to show this. There's been some polling that has been released recently that points in this direction. In the UK, there was a study that came out that published this week. It was called the Quiet Revival. The Quiet Revival, being led mostly by Gen Z. In the past 5 or 6 years in the UK, church attendance is up 50%. And it's mostly people who are in their 20s or younger. And that's great. That's across the pond. We dealt with them 200 years ago. What about here? Okay? What is going on here? Well, the biggest kind of data organization in Christianity, in church, this thing called the Barna Group, and they do all kinds of polling, they get all kinds of information, and they recently had a 5-year kind of survey where they began it in 2019. It closed up this year, and they have some interesting information. Here is a graph. If it works, is it working? It's not. Can I get my iPad slide? Hey, there it is. More people are following Jesus. Among U.S. adults, I have made a personal commitment to follow Jesus that is still important in my life today. In 2021, that was 54% of U.S. adults. Today, that is 66% of U.S. adults. 12% increase in the past 5 years. I have made a personal commitment to follow Jesus that is still important in my life today. And some of you are like, I don't buy it. Some of you are cynical by nature. I lovingly say that cynicism is not a fruit of the Spirit. You can talk to Jesus about that later. But even if that is true, even if there's some some kind of surfacey, Christian in name only kind of information there, and then there's some legitimate ones, the large number would say, yeah, maybe there's some more Christian in name only followers of Jesus, but there's also some more real followers of Jesus. The point is, the trend is on the rise. And here's what's most exciting, or I think is most exciting about this information. That increase is primarily among the younger generations. Primarily among the younger generations. The next generation is leading the way. Now, I had to actually draw over these numbers because the ink that was on there was not visible. So you'll have to excuse my little craft project, my little arts and crafts time, and my sloppy handwriting. But these line graphs will show, green line is men, the pink line is women, and this is the generationally, the increase from 2019 to today. Today, it's a rise from Gen Z. 67% of Gen Z men say, I've decided to follow Jesus. 61% of Gen Z women. 71% of Gen Millennial, that didn't work, of millennial men say that I'm following Jesus today. 64% of millennial women. And if you're not sure how the generations break down, I am a millennial. And I'm not going to make any comments on that other than to say I am a millennial. And I'm like right kind of smack dab in the middle of the millennial generation. I am 35, almost 36. So there's some millennials who are a little bit older than me. There's some who are a little bit younger than me. So that's basically my generation. If you're like in your early 40s and down, this is what it's talking about. You're a millennial. Unless you get a lot younger, if you are in high school right now, if you are in college right now, if you are in your kind of early 20s, entering into the career field, that you're Gen Z then. The increase in faith is among Gen Z and millennials. That is counterintuitive because most people would say it's the silver hair people, our senior saints that go to church. I'll bring that one back. That's who's going to church and they're just returning to church. And it's not for young people. Young people are walking away from the faith. But if you actually look at Gen X, don't worry, I haven't forgotten you, Gen X. Everybody else does. But Gen X and boomers, both men and women, have stayed almost flatline. In fact, in some, they have dropped off. It's not young people who are like walking away from faith, or maybe they have, but they are coming back. The increase in faith is among the youngest generations. In fact, those who have kind of checked out tend to be those who are a little bit older. Not at Hope Community, because we're all about this. We're like, we want to follow Jesus, and we want other people to know him. But here's what I have for this, and then we're going to jump into the actual point of the message. You're like, what? Is like if you are younger in this church, which I know is a lot of us, we've got a lot of young families, we've got a lot of babies being born, lots of like that, and that is awesome. Like, keep it up. Like, be encouraged by this, and don't think that this is a finish line for you. This is a starting point. Like, this is not cool. We're awesome. Let's pat ourselves on the back. It's like, let's go. Let's tell more people. And if you are among the older generations in our church, if you are Gen X, if you are a baby boomer, here's what I beg and I pray. We need you. We need spiritual mothers and fathers. We need spiritual grandmothers and grandfathers. You are actually at a stage of life where you can pour in and you can invest in generations coming up in ways that I cannot. I don't have the life experience or the time or the bandwidth, but so many of you, if you're a little bit older, you have that. I would actually go as far to say, again, not in our church, but I know this is the case some places, that one of the reasons why some of the younger generations have dropped off faith is because some of the older generation says, that's not my problem, that's not my responsibility. It is, we need you to pour in and invest in those who are coming. This is really, really encouraging information. Like, this is awesome. There's a curiosity in faith in Jesus. People for decades now have been kind of buying into like what the world has been selling and realize, oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't, this promised a whole lot of stuff, and I am empty, and I am broken, and I'm looking for something more. I'm looking for something transcendent. I'm looking for something to build my life on. And a lot of people are saying maybe that thing is Jesus after all. That's awesome, and that's exciting. And I absolutely love that. But the question is, how then do we take advantage of that? That sounds wrong because usually it's in a bad way, but like I'm in a good way. Like how do you ride this wave? How do you say, okay, people are hungry to know more about Jesus. What do we do? What do we do? I believe with all of my heart that we are actually on the front end of, use whatever word you want to around it, spiritual awakening, revival, renewal, a movement of God. I think we are beginning to see that in our day, and we get to be a part of it. But how do we see that happens? Because just because God's moving in a generation doesn't mean he's going to move in our church. Just because God's moving in a generation doesn't mean he's going to move in my own heart, in my own life. It's not like I just get wrapped into this because it's what's happening around me. There's something that we are responsible for. A couple months ago, I think it's about a month or two ago, I heard a message by a pastor in New York City. His name's John Tyson. He pastors in New York, but he's from Australia. And so that automatically makes everything he says sound better because Australian accents are so cool. But he got really interested in revival, and he took his family on a revival tour. Like, they went on vacation one summer, and they went to all these different places throughout history where moves of God had broken out. And he said, I looked at all of them, and I talked to all the people, and there's different Christian traditions, and there's different backgrounds, and some had to focus on prayer, and some on holiness, and some on service, and some on evangelism, and there's all this wide variety. So there's one thing that is true of every move of God, and that is this, that God shows up where he's wanted, where there is a hunger, where there is a desire, and I think we're seeing that. And if we want God to show up and move in our church and in our lives, we have to desire him. And that is where I think this passage that was read of Jesus coming to his hometown of Nazareth serves as a bit of a cautionary tale for us, because they missed him, because he was not wanted. And it's not an outright rejection of Jesus. Because if you were to ask these people, like, do you want the Messiah to show up? Do you want God to move among you? Like, you want him to set you free and to heal you and to those promises that were made, good news to the poor and setting the captives free and sight life. Like, yes, we absolutely want that. We want the salvation of God. We want the redemption of God. We want God to move among us. But we don't want Jesus. It's like, I want the power of God in my life, but not the personal presence of Jesus in my life. And it's a package deal. And so I think that serves as a cautionary tale. Let's jump back in, right? So here's what has been happening. We've been in this series, as I said, into the wilderness. And Jesus, he's been tempted in the wilderness. And there's this correlation that the temptations that Jesus faces are the same things that we face in our day-to-day lives. It may not be exactly the same, like Satan ain't whispering to any of us, hey, you should turn some stones into bread. I don't think so. You should probably talk to someone if that's actually happening to you. And bread wouldn't even be the temptation for me. It's like, you should turn those stones into a steak and a pint of ice cream. I'm like, oh, Lord help me, because I would if I could. But he overcomes the temptation of the lust of the flesh, turn the stones into bread. The temptation of the pride of life, hey, jump off the temple, make God save you. You don't have to submit to his will. He overcomes the temptation of the lust of the eyes. I'll give you all of the kingdoms and all the power and all of these things. He overcomes these temptations that we fail at over and over and over. And as soon as he comes out of the wilderness, Luke in his account of this in Luke chapter 4 says he leaves and he's full of the Spirit's power. He's full of the power of the Spirit. And he starts going into towns and doing miracles and teaching about the kingdom of God. He begins healing people and casting out demons. It's like, oh my gosh, like the power of God working through Jesus. But then he comes to Nazareth. Here's what we read. When he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual to the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures. And the scroll of Isaiah the prophet was handed to him. And he unrolled the scroll and found the place where this was written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. So he gets up and he reads from the scroll of Isaiah. This is Isaiah 61. It's just the first couple of verses. This is what's known as a messianic prophecy. It's a prophetic word about like the Messiah who would come, the one who was anointed. That's what Messiah means, this idea of being anointed. Whenever a king would be chosen or a ruler would be chosen, they would anoint him with oil. I mean, it was a common practice. That was a term that could be used. But there was going to be a specially anointed one who would be anointed by the power and the Spirit of God. And that when he showed up, things would begin to change. That the blind would see. The captives would be set free. The year of the Lord's favor would come. As you read down through the rest of Isaiah 61, you see this there's all this beautiful language about this being a picture of a restored world. No more sin, no more death, no more sorrow, no more pain. Oh, we are longing for that day. Jesus stands up, he reads this, and then he rolls up the scroll, it says, hands it back to the attendant, and sits down. All the eyes in the synagogue looked at him intently. This was their common way of teaching in the synagogue. You would read it, and then you would sit down, and the rabbi would begin to teach or to explain. So there's nothing out of the ordinary here. But you're expecting Jesus as the teacher in this situation to begin talking about, okay, here's what this means. Here's some insight into Isaiah. Hey, what is it going to look like whenever the year of the Lord's favor comes? Let me explain this to you. Like you would expect him, they would have expected him to just start talking about what Isaiah meant, but that's not what he does. No, instead, he begins to speak to them and says, the scripture that you've just heard has been fulfilled this very day. Here's his point. His point is, okay, I am the Spirit anointed one. It says that when he comes out of the wilderness, Jesus comes out of the wilderness, verse 14, just full of the power of the Spirit. The Spirit of God is upon him. He is the Messiah. He is the one here to announce good news, to freedom, to anyone who will accept him as such. Right? And so we go back and we think about these things that he has promised. The Spirit of the Lord is upon Jesus. He is anointed with the Spirit. He is the anointed one. He is the Messiah. And he's been anointed for a purpose. And he says to bring good news to the poor. Now, when we think about the poor in our context, because we're very materialistic, right? Everything is about stuff, and that's just what I can see and feel and touch. And so we think poor, and we automatically think the economically poor. And that would have included, in Jesus' day, that would have included the economically poor, but it was also more. Poor is anyone who is the downcast, the downtrodden, the forgotten, the unwanted, the people in a community that say, that everybody else looked at them and said, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, nobody wants you, and what God is doing certainly is not for you. They had no, if we think of like economic capital being financially poor, they had no relational capital, no societal capital, no religious capital. Nobody wants them in the temple system, practicing, following Yahweh. But when the Messiah comes, he says, actually, that's exactly who I'm here for. I am here for the people who have nothing, where they are just so desperate that they are desperate for God. They are going to be the ones that hear and understand the message. Those that look around and say, it doesn't matter what I have, all of this just leads to poverty. I am desperate for God. I need him. Good news to the poor. To proclaim that captives will be released. That Jesus shows up and he sets people free, captives released, the oppressed set free. The people who are in captivity and in bondage to sin, to shame, to addiction, to depression, to anxiety, to all of the things that hold us captive, to death itself. We read throughout the scripture that sin ultimately leads to death, and there is absolutely no escaping it. You and I, all of us, we are going to die. We are captives to death. And Jesus comes with a message that says, I've come to set you free. Captives will be set free, and the blind will see. This is one of the really unique promises made about the Messiah, and one of the unique things that Jesus does over and over. Go through and read the amount of times that he opens up blind eyes. It's like, what is up with that? It's him saying, I am the Messiah. Jesus opens blind eyes, and he opens our eyes up today. Those of us when we're spiritually blind, man, we think that we look around this world and it's like all there is what we see, and we come to faith in Jesus, and all of a sudden it's like your eyes are opened up and you're like, whoa, I see what I couldn't see before. He opens our eyes to see what's really going on in the world. He opens our eyes to see who he's made us to be. He opens our eyes to see who God is and how we can be in relationship to him. And the time of the Lord's favor has come. Time has come where God just pours out his favor and pours out his grace and pours out his love upon people. And Jesus, he says this, and he says, this is fulfilled today. When they expect him to just talk about what this means, he says, I don't want to talk to you about what it means. I want to show you that it's actually here. It's happening right now. What that does is it puts his listeners then, and it also puts us as people reading this today, in this kind of position of having to really make a choice with this. Right? Like there is no kind of fence sitting. There's no like, okay, that's interesting. Let me think about that. He's not just teaching like moral instruction. He's not teaching something like, cool, let me take some notes on that. He's teaching in such a way that says, this is happening. I'm doing it. Do you believe it or not? Do you want to be set free? Okay, there's freedom in me. Do you want to have your eyes open? Okay, there's sight to the blind in me. Do you want to experience God's grace and favor in your life? Okay, you find that in me. So either he brings God's promises or he does not. And he puts that before the people of Nazareth as he's teaching in the synagogue. Verse 22 says that, everyone spoke well of him, and they were amazed at the gracious words that came from his lips. And so there's been rumors spreading about him. He's been kind of doing ministry in the surrounding areas. He's been healing people and doing miracles. I'm like, oh, who's this Jesus guy? What is going on? And it says that they're amazed. There's two ways that you can be amazed by something. You can be amazed, but like in a good way, like, wow. Or you can be amazed and like, wow. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference. And I think it's that, wow, I see. There's a difference. And I think it's based on the context, this is the second kind of wow. They're like, wow, okay, who's this guy? Because look what they say next. How can this be? You're claiming Isaiah 61, that we know this, we've heard this read, we've been hoping for this, we've been wanting this our entire lives. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, everybody has had this expectation and this hope. What? Who are you to say that you can show up and do this? And look at the question they ask. Isn't this Joseph's son? We know your dad, dude. Like, who do you think you are to show up? Like, we know your dad. And Mark and Matthew also include this interaction, this time of Jesus in his hometown. And they kind of include the remarks of the crowd a little bit more, and you'll get an idea of what their problem with Jesus' claim is. So here's how Mark records it, Mark 6. They say, where did this man get these things? And what's the wisdom that's been given to him? What are these remarkable miracles that he's performing? Isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's son and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. Like, Jesus, we've heard some rumors about what you're doing, but for you to stand up and say that like you're the Messiah, And all these promises are being fulfilled in you today. Who do you think you are? Like, we know you. You grew up down the road. Like, we used to play with you when we were kids. Like, we know who you are. How are you going to make these claims? Who are you to say that the scripture is fulfilled? And this is a really hard thing. This is a really hard thing that they are dealing with, that I think we deal with as well. And that the longer that you know Jesus, the easier it is to become familiar with him. The easier it is to take offense at the things that he says. The easier it is to say, no, like I've already experienced all there is to know about Jesus and what he has for my life. And I already know what this whole faith thing is about. And certainly he can't do that. He doesn't move in that way. He doesn't work in that way. He doesn't want that thing in my life. Jesus, we know you. We know your mom. We know your dad. You're just a family business carpenter kind of guy. We know your brothers. We know your sisters. We know that you can't possibly be the Messiah. And he said to them, well, you will undoubtedly quote this proverb, physician, heal yourself, meaning do miracles here in your hometown like those that you did in Capernaum. But I tell you the truth, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. And so he already knows that this is going to be their response. He's like, man, I'm coming here, which I think is a beautiful thing about Jesus, by the way. Like, even when he knows we will reject him, he comes to us anyway. And says, like, even though I know your heart is cold towards me, I'm still going to present myself to you. Even though he knows he's going to be rejected in his hometown, he goes and says, hey, I've got good news. I've got good news. No prophet is accepted in his own hometown. And notice, I mean, they're offended right now, but they're not like over the top offended right now. They're kind of feeling out the situation. They're like, okay, who are you claiming to be? And we're not sure we buy that. We've known you for too long. It's the thing that he says next that puts them over the top. Because he reaches into a couple of moments in Israel's past and brings them up as the example of what he is doing and also what they are going to miss out on. So here's what he says, verse 25. Certainly there were many needy widows in Israel in Elijah's time. The heavens were closed for 3.5 years and a severe famine devastated the land. And yet Elijah was not sent to any of them. He was sent instead to a foreigner, the widow of Zarephath in the land of Sidon. And many in Israel had leprosy in the time of the prophet Elisha. But only one was healed, Naaman, a Syrian, not an Israelite. Jesus points out two things that happened in the past in Israel's history in the days of these two great prophets, Elijah and Elisha. Like these two prophets, everybody knows about them. Like they are like the prophets that Jesus is saying, hey, when him doing this, he's identifying with this history of the prophets. He is one who's come to speak on behalf of God. And he says, you know those two prophets that we had, Elijah and Elisha? And there was this time in the past whenever they did these incredible miracles. Elijah was sent to help a widow, but it was not a Jewish widow. Elisha was sent to heal leprosy, the guy named Naaman, but he wasn't a Jewish man. In fact, not only was he not a Jewish man, he was the commander of a foreign army, an enemy of God's people. Here's what Jesus is saying. When God isn't accepted by his own people, he goes to those who will accept him. He's like, hey, we have a precedent for this. This has happened before. And so if I'm not accepted here in my own hometown, that's fine. I will go to those who will accept me. And we see this then in a broader picture in Jesus' ministry. We see over and over that his own did not accept him. He tells stories about, hey, inviting people to a wedding feast. And people are like, I can't come. I don't want to come. Like, well, then go invite the people who will come. Like Jesus is on a mission to tell whoever will accept him that he is going to work in their life and bring salvation. The question is, do we want him or not? Essentially, he's telling them, I'm going to go to the people who want me, and if you don't want me, you are going to miss out. You know those messianic prophecies. You know this Isaiah 61 thing that I just read. You know the thing that you've been wanting your entire life. It's found only in me, and if you don't accept it in me, you're going to miss out on the promises. This is what does it. This is what does it. This is what sends the people over the top. It says, when they heard this, when they heard him say, you are not going to get to be a part of the messianic kingdom. You are not going to get to experience the salvation of the Messiah. You are missing it because you're missing me. When they heard that, the people in the synagogue were furious. Jumping up, they mobbed him and forced him to the edge of the hill on which the town was built. And they intended to push him over the cliff, but he passed right through the crowd and went on his way. The reason that he went right through the crowd is because his time had not yet come. Jesus would not be pushed over a cliff at the will of the people. No, he will go to a cross on his own will. No one's forcing him there. He's doing it out of love. And that is what that's what we celebrate as we come into this week of Easter. By the time Jesus had finished speaking in the synagogue, the people they were furious. They had known Jesus so long already that they had these preconceived ideas about who he was, and they could not fathom that the carpenter boy who grew up down the road, they could not fathom that he could be the Messiah. Their familiarity with Jesus led to offense at Jesus, which ultimately resulted in rejection of Jesus. And when we get so familiar with Jesus, when it's just like, and again, the longer you're following him, the easier this becomes. The more that we are surrounded kind of in church culture and Christian culture, the easier this becomes. We're like, man, I'm not rejecting Jesus. Like, I love him and I want him. It's like, I don't know, man. I got to check my own heart in that sometimes, because it's like, yes, I want Jesus and I want his power in my life and I want him to work in my life. But when he shows up in a way that makes me uncomfortable, in a way that I don't like, and I go, oh, no, not that far, Jesus. Not in that way, God. The tragedy is that the people of his hometown, they miss out on what he wanted to do. We read in the Gospels that he only laid his hands on a few sick people. But that was all that happened. He comes out of the wilderness. He has resisted the temptations of the enemy. He comes out of the wilderness full of the Spirit's power, and he begins going into towns, into villages, into people, and setting them free, and teaching them, and feeding them, and doing all these amazing things. And then he shows up in Nazareth, and they're like, no, thank you. We want that, but we don't want you. We want, really, and this is so much of what we see today, we want the kingdom of God without the king, Jesus. They miss out on what he wanted to do. Like Jesus' bold claim in the synagogue that day changed the way that he was viewed by his own people. One moment he's surrounded by fanfare. Everyone's like, oh, Jesus is here. We've heard some cool things about him. Teach us, Jesus, and do some miracles here. And then the next, he's on the edge of a cliff getting ready to be shoved off by a mob. That wasn't the only time in Jesus' ministry that happened. In fact, today is Palm Sunday. And this is like the same pattern that happens during Holy Week, as Paul read to open up our services today. He reads that Jesus comes into the city of Jerusalem under all this fanfare, and everyone's saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, which means save us now. You're the king we've been waiting for. Come save us. And everybody's loving Jesus, and everybody's celebrating. And by the end of the week, the shouts of Hosanna turn to shouts of crucify him. The religious leaders are looking for opportunity to arrest Jesus, and the people reject him because he shows up in ways. They're like, oh, you're our king, but not like that. We don't want you to be the king in that way. We don't want you to work in that way. We don't want you to move in that way. The people of Nazareth, the people of Jerusalem, many of us today, our preconceived ideas of who Jesus was, who Jesus is, holds us back from seeing what he wants to do now. And the point of kind of looking through this and talking about this is not to condemn them, and it's also not to condemn us when we struggle with this. It is to just see that we have this tendency to grow really, really comfortable and say, God, I want you to move in my life, but here are my parameters for how you can do it and who you can be in the way that this is going to happen. Are our religious expectations of Jesus preventing us from really engaging with him? From hearing his word, from being shaped by his word, being shaped by his Spirit? Are we too comfortable and too familiar with Jesus? Like, Jesus has come to set us free. Those words that he quoted of Isaiah 61 are still true today. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that the captives would be released, that the blind would see, the oppressed would be set free. The time of the Lord's favor has come. And that scripture is fulfilled today. Today, which means that there is good news today. There is freedom today. There is sight to the blind today. There is the grace of God today. It is fulfilled. Like, Jesus still changes lives today, and he moves in power today. It's like we think that he doesn't do that anymore, but Jesus did not renege on that promise. It wasn't like, hey, this I'm doing this now, but psych, I'm not doing it anymore. No, he still changes lives today. But God shows up where he's wanted. Do we want him? And do we want him? When we say that, do we mean that? We're like, I want you, but because man, sometimes, you know what? Me saying I want God, there's like a warning underneath of that. that says, warning, these statements have not been whatever, because it's like, it costs us, man. Like so often we say, God, I want you, and then life gets really, really uncomfortable. It says, if you want me, this is what it's going to look like. God shows up and moves and works and is changing lives and can change lives and is going to continue to change lives. And I know, man, there are some of you that push back against that and you're like, but that's not the Jesus that I know. That's not the Jesus that I'm familiar with. That's not the Jesus that I'm comfortable with. That's not what I grew up hearing about. That's not been my church experience. And that's just all our modern way of saying, isn't this just Joseph's son? Isn't that Mary's boy? We know his brothers and his sisters. I know Jesus, and that's not the Jesus that I know. And maybe, just maybe, the Jesus that you know isn't the real thing. Or maybe it's partially the real thing, but he has more. There's some of Jesus that you do not know, that you have not experienced yet. See, for some of you, the Jesus you know is so shaped by your bad church experience and your church hurt and what some other Christian said about you, your bad faith experiences. And that's the only way that you can see Jesus now. Or you've been shaped by a view of Jesus that's been shaped by cultural caricatures, that he's stodgy, he's a killjoy, he's repressive, he wants to say no to everything. And that's the only way that you see Jesus. You fail to see that he says, I want to come to give you life to the fullest. Some of us are so familiar with a version of Jesus that quite honestly, he is based on feelings and emotions. And so our faith is about an inch deep. When life is good, my faith is good. When life gets tough, my faith wanes. I know a Jesus who works through my encounters and my feelings, but you need to come to know the Jesus who works through discipleship and a rootedness in the scriptures. Notice when Jesus shows up in Nazareth, he doesn't just show up in the synagogue and say, hey, I'm here. I got some interesting information for you. No, he shows up and he quotes the scriptures. God moves and works through his word. You need to encounter the Jesus through his word. For being really honest, I know our culture. I know our church. I know some of the background. I know what my own background has been as it relates to faith, and we have the opposite problem. See, for many of us, the Jesus that we know, we only know Jesus from here up. It's like, it's head knowledge, man. It's give me the information, help me to think about Jesus. I've got a perspective of I want to keep Jesus completely explainable and safe, that faith is only a matter of my intellect. And so my perspective when I show up and come to church is I'm coming to learn something rather than I'm coming to meet with someone. I want to learn some things about Jesus rather than have a meeting with him. Right? And it's like, keep the emotion out of it, man. Keep the engagement of my spirit out of it. Let me just learn something. Let me just have a lesson. Let me go home. Let me stay safe. I don't know why we're singing songs anyway. Why do we even need to sing songs? I'm going to stand here and I'm not going to like it. Because God wants to engage with our hearts, guys. We can easily come to a place where we say, I'm not going to engage. I'm going to leave my emotions out of it. I know I need prayer, but I'm not going to go receive prayer because that's not the Jesus I know. That's not the faith that I know. I'm not going to be open to the prompting of the Spirit. That Jesus, I say he's here, but really, I just come here to think about him. He's not really here. But he's very much here. And man, he's with us right now. And I guarantee if we could see him with our physical eyes with us, we would not just think about him. We would fall at his feet in worship. We would throw our arms around him. We would beg him to heal us. We would cry out to him, say, set me free, open my eyes, give me good news, heal my marriage, heal my body, set me free from addiction, bring back my prodigal son. We would be at his feet just begging. But we're like, no, I can't let me just think about God. It's great to think about him, but it's even better to know him. It's even better to know him. How often do we miss out on all that Jesus is and all that he offers because we are just so familiar? We have a picture of Jesus, but he has more for us. And so we're going to wrap things up. We're going to continue to sing. And I simply want to invite you, as we close out with singing, as we close out with communion, may the cry of our hearts just be, God, we want you here. I want you in my life. I want you in my church. I want you in my family. I want you in my community. Jesus, would you please come? You are welcomed here. Would you break down all the preconceived ideas that I have about you in the way that I think you can and the way that I think that you can't work, and let me just see you for who you are. If during this time, as we're singing or any time during the rest of the service, if you need prayer, I'm going to be hanging out up here at the front. I would love to pray with you. If you don't want to make your way to the front, that's fine. We're a very kind church. Just tap somebody next to you. Somebody would love to pray for you. But let's worship. Let's respond. Let's invite Jesus into this place. Let's have a hunger for him.